Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Central Podcasting Unit. My name is Noah, and I'm here in office with my co-host Liam.
And man, is it good to be here.
It sure is. It's a very rainy Friday.
Yeah. When is it not a rainy Friday? I
Yeah,
feel like
seriously. It has been really gross for these past couple Fridays.
April's over. Let the showers leave.
I know. Friday, May 1st. It is crazy. It does not feel like this.
It does not feel like this.
No, it does not.
It also doesn't feel like less than 4 hours before this episode goes live. But hey, that's just the up-to-datedness of the information we want to provide.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I forgot we were working against a clock, so this should be fun.
Oh, yeah, it should be.
Real quick, before we really get too deep into the episode, just a few housekeeping things I want to take care of. First and foremost, Noah and I just kind of wanted to throw out a big thank you to everybody who's listened to the podcast in the past week and given us feedback and support. We're up to 60 views across all platforms,
Wow.
and we've gotten a lot of really positive support and feedback from a lot of people, as well as some critiques. So we've definitely taken a lot of that into account, and hopefully we'll be able to continue improving on this and expanding our listener base. We've just been blown away with the amount of people that we've had listen so far, because obviously not a lot of marketing necessarily went into it, because I'm not made of money.
Not in this economy.
No, not in this economy. Yeah, that's a saying I can throw around a lot now. So it's really been great to see just kind of the support we've been getting from people. The other thing as well is for those that pay attention to our Facebook, you'll know that one of the things that we attempt to do but have been not as successful as we should be with trying to do is kind of like a technology tip Tuesday. Just a way to provide some content and some tips as well for the website. That did not happen this past week, even though I said last week in our post that it would. And the reasoning for that is just it was difficult to find a tip that was relevant, because you could throw up any sort of tip, if you will, but if you're not going to find one that is relevant or people will use, then that's not necessarily beneficial. I like to look for something I would use. And when you try to figure out technology tips, and it's not something just off the top of your head, what you get is a lot of like keyboard shortcuts that somebody will look at and say, oh, wow, that's really interesting, and then never.
No.
So, but whenever we do have technology tips, we'll make sure to bring them up here so that, we'll cover them real quick in our podcast. Just make sure you're getting that information. And so that's really all I had in the way for housekeeping.
Yeah, a lot of big things. Happened this week. Liam, you got a new phone, didn't you?
I did get a new phone, and it has a. I already showed you, but it has a dead pixel, and I'm really angry about it.
That is so frustrating.
I don't know if it's a bug or what it is, but essentially what my problem is that whenever I call somebody, I got the Galaxy S20 5G, so don't go too near me. My phone spreads the coronavirus with that 5G. Which, by the way, to just throw it out there, I think next week's episode is going to be almost exclusively dedicated to the 5G controversy with this whole coronavirus, the COVID-19 stuff. So that'll be something to look forward to. But with my phone it's interesting because whenever I call somebody, what'll happen is right next to my camera on the front of my phone, one of the pixels will start flickering.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really frustrating. Really interesting with the camera, by the way. It's the punch hole design. I don't know if you've seen the punch hole designs necessarily, but there's no whatever they call that. Like the head of the iPhones, the notch. There's no notch. The camera's just integrated into the screen.
It's a really cool look.
It is a really cool look.
Yep.
Yeah, I was torn between getting this phone, and I'll be honest with you, I really contemplated for half a second there the new iPhone, even though I hate iOS. I know we talked about it a little bit last week, but I think you did some more research into it, didn't you?
I did do some more research into the iPhone SE a little bit. Now this is the second generation of the iPhone SE, the 2020 revision. So a lot of the information that was given last week is true. It is starting at $399. There are three different capacities: 64 gigabytes, 128 gigabytes, and 256 gigabytes, which is
it's
unique.
Not bad.
Yeah, it's not bad.
It's pretty good.
Not bad. Especially getting 64 gigabytes for $399. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that is a really good deal. I know Chromebooks come with 16 to 32. I've seen some.
Yep. Yep. Oh boy. But overall, the iPhone SE is the shell of an iPhone 8
Yep.
with upgraded components
Yep.
and a slightly larger screen.
A slightly larger screen. So it is
Yeah.
slightly different than the iPhone 8 because I've heard
Yeah.
it compared to the iPhone 8 kind of almost to its own detriment. But it's not necessarily a full-on copycat of an iPhone 8.
Not quite. So it does have a slightly better camera, even though it's the same amount of megapixels, and that is due to to Apple's A13 Bionic chip, the same processor that is in their flagship iPhone 11 Pro.
All right, so what's that mean in English?
So, so it has the same power as a modern smartphone.
Okay.
Which that processor is one of the best processors on the market for a smartphone that you can get.
So it's comparable to the iPhone 11s.
Yes, it is comparable to the iPhone 11. It's the same processor as in the iPhone 11 in a smaller package. It's a budget iPhone 11 Pro, if you would.
So is the camera really worth $700? Is that really what's bringing the price down, or do you think they're making any money off this? Because that price point is.
Oh, I definitely think that they're making some money on it, because the pure fact is that if you have anything, if you have an iPhone below the iPhone XR,
Okay.
I would strongly consider upgrading.
Really?
Yes, I would, because right now you can get an iPhone 8.
Okay.
Which is, pretty good. You could get an iPhone 8, which is pretty decent. I that's still a phone I would consider
Sure.
buying for like $328, something like that.
You can buy the iPhone 8 for that,
Yeah.
you said? Okay.
Or you can buy the iPhone SE, the new iPhone SE,
Sure.
for $399 starting.
Right.
Why would you buy a phone with less processing power
Sure.
for a little bit less when you can spend like $30 more and get like a pretty much a flagship smartphone?
Essentially a flagship smartphone. Yep.
Yeah, it's and at this price point, you're really getting a lot for your money. I mean, you're getting wireless charging, you're getting rapid charging, plus you're getting that IP67 resistance. IP67.
Yeah,
sorry,
you can see the look on my face.
I know, I saw that. So IP67 water resistance means that water resistance is water and dust resistant. Means that it can be submerged in a meter of water for
Okay.
up to 30 minutes.
That's
and survive,
pretty cool.
Which is pretty cool. And you will not find that in an Android phone at the same price point.
Whoa, you're just going to smack on my Androids like that?
You will not find that in an Android phone at that price point. Another thing you won't find in most Android phones at that price point is wireless charging.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I only have flagships, so.
Yeah. Well, so you're a little bit fortunate there. Spoiled. Yeah.
It's interesting, actually. I saw an article from, I think it was, and I know we had talked about this previously this week, but an article from Android Central that was essentially titled something along the lines of, I wish $400 Android phones were as good as the iPhone SE, from Android Central.
Yeah.
So I found that really funny because it's relatively universally the phone is regarded in a highlight, which is, I mean, power plays by Apple.
Absolutely.
Absolute power play.
So
there was a bit of a controversy I had heard, and I know I had mentioned something to you when you were planning on doing your research about the battery. Did you find anything about
I
that?
was just about to get
You
into
were?
that.
Okay.
So the battery is the same. It has the same. It essentially has the same battery life as the iPhone 8. It's pretty much the same battery. But it's interesting that Apple was able to keep the same battery life when putting better components in essentially the same case. So I commend them for being able to do that. I think that the controversy is that we're used to having phones with 11, 12 hours of battery life in our flagships now, and we're just not getting that with the iPhone SE. And I feel like that's what's kind of holding it back a little bit. So if Apple put a larger battery into that, that would have helped it. Another thing that the SE is getting knocked on a little bit is its dated design.
Sure.
Because it has that home. Yeah, I know. I know, right? Because it has that home button and it has those a little bit thicker bezels, and we're used to an almost bezel-less design.
Does it have the headphone jack?
It does not.
It does not.
That was another thing.
Really?
Yeah, that's another drawback. Androids at this price point oftentimes will have a headphone jack.
Yeah.
Even your phone. Your phone has a headphone jack, right?
No, it doesn't. And you know
It
what?
doesn't.
I didn't know that going into my purchase with it. So I went to go play some music in Megan's car because she doesn't have Bluetooth. She just has an audio jack. Well, I got screwed out of that one, and I was not happy about it.
I'll tell you what, coming from an audio engineer, this is a little bit of a side tangent, but I don't like the fact that phones don't have an audio jack anymore. Don't have the headphone jacks anymore. It makes my job kind of a little bit of a pain.
You know, it's really frustrating how the industry, if you will, can just kind of willy-nilly determine what's going to be the standard without and going against a lot of consumer input and a lot of consumer feedback. And it seems like, to me at least, it seems like a relatively what's the word? A mistake on Apple's part. I would call it a mistake on Apple's part to omit the headphone jack from this option, because if you're buying a $400 iPhone, you're probably not spending $100 buying AirPods. You know, you're probably not somebody that's buying Bluetooth headphones if you're not investing in flagship phones. So the fact that they're, if you would, flagship killer, you could almost label it, because of how good it is spec wise, you know, for people that don't really care about the camera, does not come with that headphone jack feature, is just really annoying, because it seems like something that target demographic would really utilize. And again, it's one of those things where the technology was not in place when the headphone jack was phased out, and I'm still really angry about that, because I don't like that they're pulling it away from the flagship phones. But it's just kind of one of those things where we forget, because everybody's getting so accustomed to the flagship phones, but these are actually luxury lines of phones, if you will.
And they're taking stuff away from us.
Because it's luxury, if you will, because, you know, people that are using high-end phones use high-end gadgets. You know, that's what it is. But ultimately, it's just the people that buy the luxury phones are much, much higher than perhaps you would perceive. Like, if you targeted and said to somebody, you know, do you view the iPhone 11, the top model of the iPhone 11, as a luxury phone, the average person would probably say no. But in reality, that's what it is. Is it's a luxury item. So I mean, I get why they're doing it, but especially on the lower end models, like, you definitely, I think, should still be keeping that standard in place, because those people are not going to be investing in the technology needed to properly use the device if it doesn't come with everything it needs.
Definitely. So overall, the iPhone
tying
SE,
that all together.
Overall, iPhone SE, again, great purchase if you're upgrading from any iPhone or Android that came out before the iPhone XR. Just a really great budget buy.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. But you know what, in my opinion, is an even better investment?
What?
An Android phone.
Oh, boy.
I actually can't say that. I can't say spend $1,000. The iPhone SE, I believe, don't quote me on it, but I believe it's spec'd better than my new phone.
Really?
Yeah, I have an S20 5G. Did you know that there's an S20 Plus 5G?
Really?
I'm so angry about that, because I had an S9 Plus, and my S20 is smaller, and it actually upsets me a lot.
That's frustrating.
Yeah, but one thing I know that Megan's getting really excited about is the Note 20s are going to be coming out relatively soon. It was actually really interesting. So I was reading into it this morning a bit, and Samsung actually, I believe, just released their quarterly earnings, because obviously the first quarter, if your fiscal year follows the calendar year, your first quarter ended around in March. So, you know, that's given these companies a lot of time to put together their reports and so on and so forth that they have to file. And in that report, Samsung actually confirmed that the Galaxy Note 20 is coming this year, which, ooh, shocker. You know, they drop a new phone every year. But it's believed to be coming around in August, and it's looking like it's going to be a pretty impressive phone. Obviously, the processor, there's not really many surprises with the processor. It's going to be similar to the S20 lines, using kind of those top-of-the-line Snapdragons, if you will. Although I was reading somewhere that the RAM in this phone is expected to undergo some major upgrades in terms of 3 times the efficiency.
Really?
Yeah, 3 times
Interesting.
efficiency upgrade as opposed to the previous Note. And so for those of you that are maybe not entirely aware of what RAM is to just kind of put it into really, really layman's terms, is the processor of the phone determines how fast your computer can process through a function. So if you have a really slow processor, your computer or your phone is going to go through information really slowly. If you have a fast processor, you're going to be able to go through information a lot faster.
Okay.
But so the other bottleneck you run across is, say Noah, for example, task manages does a lot of tasks on his phone, and he has maybe 5, 6, 7 applications open at one time.
I never close my apps.
Yeah, well, and your phone's going to slow down dramatically if you're not closing your apps. And a large part of that is your processor, because if you're downloading something in the background, you're watching a video on YouTube, and then you leave that video, you're cool like me, and you have YouTube Premium, so you've got that video running in just a little corner, but you're also surfing Reddit or Facebook or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot for your phone to handle. And ultimately with your processors, it can only handle a limited amount of tasks at any given time. So what the RAM does is the RAM increases essentially the amount of tasks that can be handled at any given time.
Interesting.
It serves as kind of like a cache that allows the processor to essentially process more at any given time.
Okay.
So that's really kind of what RAM does. And so what makes that really interesting with these notes is, while there may not be potentially, it looks like there may not be a massive increase in processor capability, there's going to be a massive increase in RAM capability. And that's kind of going to translate into theoretically much, much faster performance when you're doing more on the notes. And that's what a Galaxy Note is meant for. It's kind of meant for being more of a workhorse.
Really?
If you will. Yeah, well, I mean, it has the are you familiar with the Notes at all?
A little bit. Why don't you explain it though?
So the big thing with a Galaxy Note, for those of you that are unaware, is that ultimately with the Galaxy Note phones is that they're known for the pen. And I don't know if you've seen it, but on the bottom of the phone, I believe it's the bottom of the phone, similar to around where you might find the headphone jack, you can push in, and a spring will release a pen, which is a dedicated stylus for that phone.
Interesting.
And so one of the things with these phones is they're curved, and because they're curved, they have a side menu that you can use in the curved screen. But the Notes take that a step further by having their custom stylus, and it has custom capabilities. It has its own set of buttons. It has its own different functionality with it, similar to how I think Apple has their own pen for the iPads.
Yep,
and
the
so
Apple
on and so
Pencil.
forth. Yes, but this is built into the Galaxy Notes. So
cool.
We don't know exactly what it's going to be just yet, because again, the phone's expected to come out around August. That tends to be when the other Notes launch. A lot of the full specs for a lot of this stuff isn't going to get announced or leaked, because big gripe of mine, you never get all the information for a phone when it's announced. You get it 3 months beforehand when everything gets leaked by somebody on the inside. It's really impressive. I feel like the companies intentionally do the leaks at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, with the consistency it happens at,
it's pretty much a marketing ploy.
it is. Well, in the people doing the leaking, if you will, they have their own social media and they have their own blogs dedicated just to publishing files and leaks. You know what I mean? Like it's not like a whistleblower here and there. It's just consistently leaking data and information. So we haven't gotten all the information about what the new pen is going to look like necessarily, but the information that we have gotten is really interesting. So obviously the RAM increased. There is going to be no headphone jack because it's a flagship phone.
Great.
Yeah, no headphone jack. What's really interesting is it's going to use the same camera design as the Galaxy S20s. And from my understanding, now I'm no camera person, but from my understanding is the Galaxy S20s have one of the best camera setups of any phone on the market right now. I don't know if it beats the iPhone 11 cameras off the top of my head, but I believe it's very comparable, if not just over the edge, especially on the Galaxy S25G Ultra, which, really rolls off the tongue. Good naming scheme right there. This, I think, will really interest you, though, and you might be able to explain the technology a bit better than I can. But the Galaxy Note 20s are going to be the first Samsung phones, and I believe I was reading all the flagship Samsung phones after this will include OLED displays. So the Note is
Oh.
going to have an OLED display. And again, I think you might be a little more familiar with what an OLED display is if you want to talk about that.
So an OLED display is pretty much always on. To some extent. So the main advantage of having an OLED display is that it shows a truer black. Because so I guess always on really isn't the right term, because the OLED displays, when there's black pixels, will
Sure.
actually turn off those pixels
Okay.
completely and not just display black. They'll turn them off.
So it creates kind of crisper.
Exactly.
Images,
It's a sharper black because it's a true black, if you will.
Sure. Okay. And so what's really interesting with that is, so obviously these phones are going to have those OLED displays. And when the OLED display is being properly utilized, it's actually going to increase or decrease, I should say, the battery life of the phone by about 20 to 25%. But from my understanding is that's a feature that you can choose to use or to not to use.
Okay.
Is kind of the full range of that display. So it seems really interesting. The new Note 20s now, obviously, you can't really compare the price points to anything that Apple's done with the iPhone SE. In fact, I and a lot of other people are really nervous about what the price point on this phone is going to be, because the S20 starts at $1,000.
Holy crap.
Right, and I believe the S25G goes up to, the S25G Ultra goes up to close to that $1,400 range. And the Notes tend to be a couple $100 more expensive.
Oh boy.
Yep.
That's a lot.
So it's going to be a lot of money. And I think what we're really starting to see here is we're really starting to see luxury phones pushing, the limits of being a luxury device. And it's just really hard to justify. We're getting to the point now where a phone, my computer has lasted me, I don't know, when did I build it? It was 4 or 5 years ago, I believe.
Something
now.
like that.
And my computer was a couple $100 more expensive than the first generation Galaxy Fold.
Okay.
The next generation's already out, and your Galaxy Fold is already becoming relatively obsolete.
Mm-hmm.
So the price of these phones and the investment you have to make into one of these phones is really, really high.
It's comparable to a computer at this point.
It is comparable to a computer at this point. But the thing is if you're investing that much money into a computer, you're keeping that computer for 6 to 8 years.
Yep.
Honestly, as long as you're keeping somewhat care of it, and you can keep impeccable care of a phone, but it's going to be out of your control, slowed down arbitrarily, without anything that you can do about it. But you're paying a premium for it. So the pricing structure of phones is just really interesting.
Yeah. Although I will, jumping back to the iPhone SE just real quick.
Sure.
I just want to touch on this real quick. The iPhone SE will continue to be supported by Apple. Like, I'll give this example. For instance, my iPhone 6s that I had before my current phone came out in 2015 and is still receiving updates for the latest OS. It's still supported by Apple. The iPhone SE, the new iPhone SE, is going to continue to be supported by Apple for like another 5 years or so. 5, 6, 7. Who knows how long? You don't see that with Android phones, right?
No, you don't. And even for example, if there's an Android update and the Note 20 receives it, there's no guarantee that the S20, which came out, only maybe 6-7 months beforehand, is actually going to receive those updates. That's how fast these phones stop receiving software updates. There's good reasoning for it, and it's because Android as a platform is being hashed up by all these different companies. So if you have a Samsung phone, you're going to be running a different operating system than a BlackBerry. They're built on the same Android core, but each of these companies has taken that core and built their own proprietary systems based around it. And so because of that, when the Android kernel, if you will, the core Android kernels get updated, it's up to the companies to bring all their phones and all their products up to code with kind of the new Android standards. And so that's just something that they choose not to do typically because of just the work that's involved. And it's just kind of the nature of how Android is, if you will. That causes that. It's for better or for worse, but ultimately you typically don't see a lot of software updates for your Android phones.
Interesting. Okay.
So, I mean, I guess to just kind of tie everything back together, I really had wanted to just kind of talk about the Note 20 because I know it's a phone that Megan's excited for. I'm a bit excited for it as well. And it's looking like it's going to be a really good phone. It's looking like it's going to be a really expensive phone.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really good phone to use to contrast the iPhone SE too.
Definitely.
Just in terms of proving and emphasizing the point that what you're paying for in these flagship phones is the feature set, is the luxury. You're paying heavily for the top of the line processor. You're paying for the super efficient RAM. You're paying for the curved screen. You're paying for the OLED. You're paying for the stylus. And if that's stuff that just doesn't interest you, there are cheaper options. And until very recently, those cheaper options have not been comparable to a flagship phone. But the iPhone SE is really kind of the first phone we've seen in a long time that is one of those cheaper options, but also competitive with these flagship phones. It's really just, when you get down to it, it's a flagship phone with none of the fluff.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, it's taking a look at this. I mean, we had a topic list we wanted to go over, and I think we just vastly overestimated the amount of time we could cover in a segment like this. So you guys are going to have to look forward to our future segments, to hear some more discussion. I know we'll likely be holding some discussion relatively soon regarding processors. We want to talk about processors because there's a bit of stuff in the news about that.
Yes.
Want to talk about security a little bit, but I think next week will be real interesting because we're going to spend some time talking about the 5G controversy.
Yes. Yeah.
Any final remarks, good sir?
Not really. I mean, yeah, I'd just like to thank everybody for listening and continuing to support the podcast. It's been really great. Last week was a really great launch week, and we're really excited to be doing this for you guys.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Feel free to leave any feedback on our Facebook page, on our YouTube channel as well, and also on our website, because we'll make a blog post with a comment section, so you can comment directly on our website as well. Again, thank you, everybody, for watching. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and we will see you next Friday.
Thank you for listening, guys. See ya.